Welcome to episode 137 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. Let me begin by apologizing for the technical difficulties that resulted in last week's episode 136, not showing up on some of the apps. My hope is that everything is back to normal this week, but I make no guarantees. If you can't find Rebirth Revolution on your favorite app, you can always get it from the website rebirthrevolution.com. If you didn't hear last week's episode, it was a shorter than normal one, but worth the listen. I think this is what I will be doing at least for this summer. I'm sure you are busy and out there having some fun, so this may fit better. If you want more, you can always go back through the previous 130 plus episodes and see if you've missed anything. This week, I want to talk about the concept of being a pattern interrupter. The term seems pretty self-explanatory. It is about making choices that do not fall in line with the choices that have been made previously by other people. Let's say that you were born into a family that has, for generations, abused and/or neglected their children. Each new generation is treated the same way and sees that as the way that life works. But someone comes along in that family and decides that they are not going to raise their children in the same way. They are the pattern interrupter. I suppose you could have a long family line of great parents and then have someone come along and decide to be abusive and neglectful, interrupting a good pattern with a bad one. But for our purposes, we're going to examine it from the other angle. It is pretty normal human behavior to do what you have always known to be done. Often, the patterns you see when you are growing up seem normal only because you have nothing to compare them to. You naturally think that however things go in your house is how they go in everyone's house. And many people don't really take the time to figure out which parts were constructive versus those that were destructive. So they continue the pattern, raising their children exactly as they have been raised. Keeping a pattern going becomes harder and harder to do over generations because each new generation that comes in has different sensibilities, and they are living in a very different world than the one their parents arrived in. It may be harder, but some people just try to use the same strategies, whether they are productive or not. So, what can make someone decide to be the interrupter? It takes a certain level of awareness and sensitivity. It usually comes from a person in the newer generation feeling damaged in some way by the pattern that they were born into. They have to be sensitive enough to feel the damage, and they have to be wise enough to want to examine the source of their pain more closely. I'm not trying to paint a picture of the parents or grandparents being monsters. They are just doing what has been done to them, not taking the time to examine whether it benefited them or made their lives more difficult. We humans tend to let most things slide unless they actually produce some sort of harm to us. Then we are more likely to put in the effort to figure out if there's another way it can be done. We tend to ignore or undervalue some of the really good things that have been done simply because they did not demand our attention through causing us harm. The way we choose to change the trajectory is not always on point. We sometimes swing wildly in the other direction, causing a different type of harm with the new pattern. A child that feels wounded by being raised by overly strict and critical parents may swing the pendulum all the way in the other direction by creating no rules, boundaries, or honest assessment for their children. This is going to create a whole host of new problems for their children that may result in them feeling the need to swing back to the overly strict and critical behaviors of the grandparents. The appropriate correction is rarely the exact opposite of the original problem. It is more often finding moderation and injecting more love and compassion into the equation. The correction often lies in recognizing that you can't deal with each and every child in the same manner, as they each have separate, distinct needs. Once you realize that each of your children is probably coming here beginning at a completely different level of spiritual awareness than their siblings, you can customize your parenting plan accordingly. It is complicated and cannot ever be done perfectly, but results appear to indicate that we are continuing to move ever so slightly in a better direction. Once you can fully picture how pattern interrupters work in families, you can widen the lens to the world at large. Here's the thing. You came here to be a pattern interrupter. That is an essential reason to be here in this place at this time. You are following a line of ancestors who made choices, both good and bad, that have created the world we live in today. It is not that they were either monsters or angels. They were just fully human. They did what made sense with the information that they had at the time, and their choices were ones that made sense to them in terms of their own survival and happiness. Of course, they struggled with the 7 deadlies like every other human who has or ever will inhabit this planet. They had the built-in frailties that they had to grapple with, like lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. They did better fighting some than others. They also lived in times where the cultural norms were sometimes horrific, like getting fired up about wiping out entire groups of people or enslaving groups of people so that they could avoid doing their own labor. Some lives, defined by race and gender, were prioritized, while others were marginalized, and yet others were seen as of little to no value at all. We have yet to dismantle some of the structures that hold these archaic, toxic ideas in place. But we are here to do just that. We are the pattern interrupters. We feel the pain, we see the damage, and we are here to do it another way. Some people can sleepwalk through their time here on Earth, doing exactly what has been done by everyone who preceded them. But that is not who we are. We are here to do important work. We are here to right the wrongs and to interject more love and compassion into the mix. We are here to acknowledge that every single soul is from the same source, and as such is of equal value. We are here to celebrate the fact that there are an unlimited number of ways to grow from the lowest levels of spiritual awareness to the highest levels, and that each path can be perfectly, legitimately unique. We will try to make corrections, and some of those will overshoot and create new problems. That is to be expected, but it cannot be the reason that we do nothing. People will not always be thrilled that we are interrupting patterns, just like every family that has a pattern interrupter probably feels that that person is a pain in the neck because they won't just be quiet and go along with everyone else. But we didn't come here to silently consent to that which is not working. We are here for bigger things. Thanks for returning for another week of Rebirth Revolution. I'm hoping that you can take some time to check in on the hearings about the January 6th insurrection. Accountability is a gift we give one another. You can always let me know how you're doing by emailing me at rebirthrev@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Rebirth Revolution can be found on all the podcast apps, usually, the music apps, on Audible, and full episodes can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages. Please rate, subscribe, download, and share whenever possible. Until next week, think about the patterns in your life. Think about when you have been an interrupter. Stick with your COVID precautions and be open to so much more. Remember, you are loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and always evolving.